right now. I hope we are. If someone could type something in the chat letting me know that this exists, that would be amazing. Amazing, amazing, amazing. I was told my stream key was wrong just a second ago, so you never know. Can anyone say, we can see Jonathan Little? Oh, hello, Mr. Little. Good. So YouTube is at least working. Is anybody here on Twitch or Facebook or Twitter or any of that? If someone's here on Twitch or Twitter or Facebook or any of the non-YouTube channels, let me know that too. I suppose we'll see that in just a minute. All right, Teresa says it's working. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Good, good, good. I posted that I am having this webinar, and about 7 people asked the question, what is small stakes? What does Jonathan call small stakes? And you have to understand that in reality, small stakes, medium stakes, high stakes, the buy-in is not actually what matters. What matters is the caliber of opponent that you are going to be playing against. Because in the high stakes games, you could be playing against super, super terrible opponents every once in a while. Quite often, when the games run at the very high stakes, it's because there are a few very bad players either at the table or in the field, depending on if you're in tournaments or cash games. Typically, though, as the stakes get lower and lower, the game gets softer and softer, and thus the opponents are making more mistakes as you play smaller stakes games. So the actual dollar amount or buy-in amount is not all that relevant. A lot of people like to try to compartmentalize their play or their being, their essence. They want to say, I'm a small stakes player, or I'm a medium stakes player, or they like the idea of progressing. I progress from the micros to the small stakes, etc. And I guess that's fine and good, but at the same time, it doesn't really say a whole lot about your overall strategy, right? Because if the players at, let's say, 1-2 play the same as 2-5, but you call 1-2 and 2-5 small stakes versus medium stakes, you may think you need some drastically different strategy to beat the 2-5 game, whereas in reality, the strategy you need to beat it is probably somewhat similar, right? So recognize that. Recognize that the games at various buy-in levels, or your strategy at each individual table, is not really based on the buy-in you bought in for, but instead the caliber of opponents you are against, or the type of opponents you are against. For example, you may show up at a small stakes table one day and it be all maniacs, in which case you just need to be kind of tight and straightforward and play better cards than them. Or you may show up and it's all weak, tight, passive players who never put a chip in the pot unless they have the nuts. In those games, be very aggressive until they decide that they want to play hands, right? So make sure that you are adjusting to whatever your opponents do wrong, and don't get wrapped up on things that don't really matter, like tags, right? Like classifications saying I'm a small stake player, or I'm a medium stakes player. That said, today we'll be discussing 3 post-flop tips to help you crush the small stakes tournaments. These are games where your opponents are messing up. If your opponents are messing up, you should get out of line to take advantage of them. How do you become a better poker player? Study. Turns out if you study a lot, your skills will improve. And if you don't, well, your skills will not. Definitely take a look at pokercoaching.com. We're actually having a Valentine's Day sale right now. Check out pokercoaching.com/Valentines. Before we get started, if you all are excited about this stream, if you like it, do me a favor, click the like and subscribe buttons below on YouTube. I would appreciate that. That appeases the YouTube robot overlords. All right, let's get to it. Recognize that tournaments, especially live tournaments, can be some of the most profitable games in the world to play. And that's because, like I said, the opponents are screwing up left and right. If your opponents are screwing up left and right, then you should adjust to take advantage of whatever they do wrong. And to win in any game, not just poker, you need to develop a fundamentally sound strategy and then learn how to adjust away from that strategy to take advantage and to exploit, or take advantage of the opponent's mistakes and to exploit their various tendencies. Now, a long time ago in the poker games, you could really just exploit your opponent's tendencies and not worry about playing a fundamentally sound strategy. That said, today, there are going to be players at most tables you play at who are pretty good. They're not making clear mistakes. And if your opponents are not making clear mistakes, then you have to play the fundamentally sound strategy, right? Can this also be applied to cash games? Yes. Although today we're going to be discussing a few short stack strategies because last free webinar I did, we discussed cash game strategies. So make sure you go back and check that one out. But yes, this stuff still applies to some extent. Diano subscribed with Twitch Prime. Thanks. Yeah, if you're watching this on Twitch, if you're an Amazon Prime member, you get to subscribe to someone for free every month. You get to pick. You don't have to give it to me. Give it to anybody you want. You might as well give away the free money, though. If you have free money to give, you might as well give it away. All right, today, I'm going to teach you how to improve your flop check raising strategy. I'm also going to teach you when you should be very aggressive and also when you should be very passive. And remember, we are trying to take advantage of the opponent's mistakes. We're not trying to play straight GTO strategy because the opponents in the small stakes games are messing up. So, tip number 1, check raise for thinner value. You're going to find that most people only check raise with the actual nuts, or very close to the actual nuts, or strong draws. And the problem with this play is that if you only check raise with the absolute nuts, or sets and 2 pairs, that doesn't really let you check raise with all that many bluffs from a fundamentally sound point of view. Now you may say, I don't really care about being balanced, which, may be fine, but you're going to find again that you do want to start off by playing a relatively fundamentally sound strategy. And there are definitely boards out there where you should be check raising, we're going to call it thin, this is going to be like top pair marginal kicker, looking to take your opponent's entire stacks whenever you happen to have them beat. So let's go through a few examples of this. Let's say button raises. You know the button's going to be raising with all sorts of wide, or with a wide range, right? Again, I recognize I have not labeled this opponent. We don't know that they're overly weak and passive or overly maniacal. We think this is just some random opponent who we don't really know anything about. And in that case, we want to make sure we're playing somewhat fundamentally sound. We're obviously going to call with the queen 10 suited. There's no real other option here, I don't think. Flop comes queen 7-3. This is a board where when we check, as we're going to do with our entire range, our opponent's going to bet frequently using a small size, as they do. I discussed this thoroughly in my tournament masterclass at pokercoaching.com. Make sure you check that out. This is a very, very common spot on an uncoordinated board where the button should be betting frequently using a small size. When your opponent is betting frequently using a small size and you are out of position, this is a key spot that you need to be check raising a decent amount of the time. And the thing is, from a fundamentally sound point of view, if you only check raise with 2 pair and better, recognize you don't actually have all that many 2 pair and better in your range, right? Because you have 3-bet pocket queens pre-flop, so you have 3 combinations of pocket 7s, 3 combinations of pocket 3s, and then maybe you have all the queen 7s and queen 3s. You probably don't have all the 7 3s because you fold those pre-flop, right? So you're really looking at not very many combinations of nut hands. But there actually are a lot of junky draws that you would love to check raise here. So this is a spot where if you had a hand like 5-4 for a gut shot, it's a reasonable check raise hand. If you had 8-6 of diamonds for backdoor straight draw, backdoor flush draw, it's a reasonable check raise hand. It's not really good enough to call, right? If you had Jack 10 of clubs, also another reasonable check raising hand. And you may say, isn't that loose and aggressive? Yeah, it is. And that's fine. Recognize in this scenario, your opponent's range is wide open. They're essentially betting with their entire range on the flop using the small size. And when they bet using their entire range, a lot of it is pretty weak. And that allows you to blast them. What if our opponent bets big on the flop? Well, they're not going to in this scenario unless they're bad. If they're especially bad, then you have to figure out what their bet size and their range are, or what their bet size indicates about their range. That said, if this was a scenario where the opponent is betting bigger, just in general, with the roughly fundamentally sound range, you should not check raise quite as often, because when people bet bigger, they're betting bigger, typically announcing that they have a strong range/nut advantage. And if they have a range and a nut advantage, you do not want to be doing a whole lot of raising, because typically your range in general is going to be in bad shape. If you're not familiar with what a range is and all of that, make sure you check out pokercoaching.com/fundamentals. When they bet big, they usually have aces and kings. Well, you have to realize, when you say they, you mean all players in the world? You mean 20% of players you play against? What they mean, right? It's important to realize that we do not know what the opponent does wrong. A lot of people love to think that they know specifically what their opponents do incorrectly, but you really don't know. You can guess, you can have general ideas, but it's very, very difficult to actually know enough to the point that you can say all small stakes players in all scenarios do this, because it's just, that's not how poker works. Anyway, this is the spot where we want to check raise. Someone asked in the chat, what do we do if the opponent shoves it all in? Again, figure out their strategy. Will your opponent ever shove all in with less than a queen? Some people will very frequently, some people will never. But this is a spot where the opponent's range is wide open, right? If the opponent's range is wide open, when we check raise using a reasonable size, they are going to call pretty frequently. And the nice thing is that if they don't call very frequently, if they fold a lot, that's great. We're just going to print loads of equity with all of those bluffs I told you about. Remember. We discussed earlier that I would be check raising with hands like 8-6 of diamonds and 5-4 offsuit, right? Really junky draws. If the opponent's going to be folding out hands like 8-7 or ace-king or ace-jack or pocket nines, we are just going to print money by check raising with the bluffs. And if they're calling with those hands like pocket nines and ace-king and 8-7, well, clearly this queen 10 is printing value, right? So either, most of the time, your opponent's going to either fold way too often or call way too often. Either way, using a fundamentally sound strategy is going to work out better for you than playing weak and tight like a lot of people do. All right, does this change if it's a re-entry tournament? Not really. All right, so we do check raise. If we get shoved on here, it's probably a fold against the general player pool. But again, like so, someone just said in the chat box just a second ago, when people bet big, they always have aces and kings. But like, I don't know that, right? But you can make assumptions if that's how your particular opponents play. It's also important to realize that people in different regions play very differently. It's also important to realize that people in $1 buy-in tournaments online play differently than $50 buy-in tournaments live, and they play different than $500 tournament players live, right? So do not make the mistake of assuming you specifically know what your specific opponents do. It's a big error a lot of people make. They think that they are a mind reader, whereas in reality, they're just, kind of a mind reader. All right. Bolo says you watch playing people online betting big with trash. Yeah, I know. That's what I'm trying to say, right? It's like, if you think poker is about learning how to play against one particular type of player, you're going to probably crush that one particular type of player, but you're going to fail long run. And my job as a poker educator is not to teach you to be one particular type of player, because that's actually pretty easy, right? Like if your opponent bets face up, they bet big when they have the nuts and small when they don't. Life's easy, right? But I'm trying to teach you how to play against all players. Learn to play a strategy that you can adjust accordingly. Okay. Anyway, this is a spot where we do check raise this hand. If we get jammed on, it's probably a fold against most people. That said, if you see that they're ripping it all in a lot against you because that's how they operate, then obviously you call it off, right? If you know what your opponent does wrong, life is easy. Okay, so we check raise. When the opponent does just call our check raise, they're going to have a whole lot of underpairs. They're going to have a whole lot of sevens. They're going to have a whole lot of ace high with backdoor draws like ace 5 of clubs, stuff like that. So this is a spot where we can now pretty confidently just bet turn and bet river. You may say, isn't that thin? And it is. The thing is, though, is that what's the alternative? We can check to try to induce bluffs, but remember, we check raise the flop. When we check raise the flop, we are announcing that we have the polarized range here. This is basically the bottom of our polarized range. So this is the bottom of our value portion of our polarized range. Like I said, we obviously have bluffs like 8-6 of diamonds and stuff like that. So this is a situation where we want to continue value betting as we would value bet with all of our other premium hands. And yeah, we're going to run into better hands sometimes, right? We're not trying to get our opponent to fold out a better hand in this scenario. We are trying to extract value from worse hands that the opponent could very easily have. And remember, we want to be able to continue betting in this way because we have lots of bluffs that would like to keep betting, like 8-6 of diamonds. When you do bet this turn, you want to make sure you are giving your opponent pretty marginal pot odds in all scenarios. You also want to make sure that you are betting roughly the same proportion of the pot on the turn as you are on the river. Notice here we're betting about 2/3 pot. If we bet the turn and the opponent calls, notice if we bet the river, we'll be betting again about 2/3 pot. This is referred to as geometric bet sizing, and often what you want to do with your polarized range. And remember how I discussed when we check raise the flop, we are essentially announcing we have a polarized range, even though this is effectively the bottom of the value portion. So anyway, we do bet turn, and we're probably going to jam it in on the river. Notice if we do check, you have to ask, will the opponent try to run lots of bluffs in this scenario? And the answer is no, because think about it, right? If the opponent in this scenario has pocket jacks or ace king, if they bet the river, am I actually folding out any better hands? And the answer is no, right? Because I'm only check raising queen 10 and better pretty much. So I'm not folding queen 10 if I check the river, so it'd be pretty bad for the opponent to try to bluff the river. Also, the opponent really should not have all that many bluffs, right? If they had the 5-4 type hands, they would fold that to a turn bet. So I mean, I guess every once in a while the opponent does have a hand like ace-x of spades or spades with a straight draw that may call the flop check raise, then call the turn bet, and then have to fold the river. But there's not all that many combinations of that, right? In this scenario, the opponent's range is usually going to be a lot of marginal made hands. And if the opponent has a lot of marginal made hands, then we get to value bet thin. So I think I like a shove. This may look a little bit thin. This is thinner than I would go in the past. But as people get better and better, they realize they just can't fold to these flop check raises and turn bets and river bets. And if they do, you're just going to run them over with your 8-6 of diamond type hands. All right, we do bet. We do get called. Do we lose? No, the opponent has a worse hand this time. Sometimes they're going to have a worse hand. Obviously, a queen's going to call us down. We block the queen, so it's not like that's all that likely, but we will get called down by underpairs a lot of the time here. Now, again, I want to make it really clear. If your opponent will fold out a hand like pocket jacks by the river, that means they're going to fold out almost everything by the river, by the way. If they're going to fold out almost everything by the river, then we should not bet the river. Because when we bet the river and they call, they're going to have a queen or better, in which case we're not actually in all that great of shape with our queen 10. But if they do fold too often, we want to make sure that we are bluffing way more often than normal if that is the case. All right, so that's one hand. Let's take a look at another example of this. We raise it up. I'm sorry, we don't raise it up. Button raises it up. We call big blind with ace 10 offsuit, which is, fine. We could 3-bet this as well if we felt inclined, but calling's fine too. Top pair marginal kicker. Go for the check raise. Go for the check raise. Would we play this any differently if the opponent used a different strategy? Well, of course we would. Come on, remember. If the opponent plays poorly, whether they're too loose or too tight or too aggressive or too passive, you should adjust accordingly. That is how you beat these games. We discussed that right at the top of the show today. I'm presuming we don't know what the opponent does wrong yet, which very often when you're playing small stakes tournaments, whether it be live or online, you're not going to know what your opponent's doing correctly. You may have ideas, but you will not know with a high degree of certainty, which forces you just to play relatively sound strategies. So this is another spot where you may think we want to check call, but this is a scenario where I think we want to go ahead and put in the check raise. Again, we're always getting stacked by the better hands anyway, right? So the only time you really want to check call in this scenario against a small flop bet, remember we're facing the small flop bet, is when we know the opponent is going to triple barrel off very frequently if we do check call the flop. Because this is obviously a hand that can check call flop, check call turn, check call river. But check raising will ensure we stack our opponent's aces, and it also prices out draws, or at least makes it more difficult for draws to continue. And there are a lot of draws here, by the way, right? Like the opponent could easily have diamonds, they could have king 10, all sorts of stuff. So we do go for the check raise, we get called. We're just going to bet turn, get called. River's a jack of spades. Kind of a nasty spot. So this is a fun one, because if you think about our range, the check raise flop and bet turn, it's going to be a whole lot of aces and a whole lot of diamonds. If we have diamonds and this jack comes, I think we do need to give up some portion of the time. We also want to check with some aces, not because we're afraid we're beat, but because if I am going to give up with some of the diamonds, because at this point the opponent's range is a whole lot of aces, which are not going to fold, and jacks, which are not going to fold, right? So this is a spot where I need to do a decent amount of checking. If we did have a busted diamond draw here, we would bet it sometimes, we would not bet it other times. If it was the good diamond draws, like king high, I'd probably end up checking. If it's a bad diamond draw, like 6-5, I would definitely bet. So in this scenario, I think we can go for the check, and we'll check call. We'll call it off. You may say, why would you check call it off here? You could lose to the jack. Sure. We could also beat busted draws. We could also beat some worse thin value bets, which is not a good play here. If the opponent does have like ace-2, they should never bet. But a lot of people do. Anyway, easy call it off. And they had king-8 of diamonds. I don't actually like this bet at all from the opponent. This is a spot kind of like where I think they should... Well, like I should be betting the weakest diamonds. I think they should also be betting the weakest diamonds. And king high, it doesn't win all that often in this scenario, but it does beat queen 10, which may make this play. It does beat the lower diamonds like 10-8 or 10-8, 10-7, 10-6 of diamonds. Lots of blockers going on here. So this is a spot where I think the opponent does not need to bluff this hand, but they do. People are going to mess up. That said, maybe this is not even a mistake. This could still be fine. That said, we cannot fold an ace. So I think this is a very, very nice spot to go for the check call. But notice how this hand would have perhaps gone down otherwise. We check call a small flop bet. Opponent checks the turn, because if they bet the turn and get called, they're in terrible shape with the king high. But if it checks down, they do win sometimes. And then on the river, we would check. They may bluff, they may check, and we just end up playing a small pot in a scenario where we actually have a pretty reasonable advantage. So I like going for the check raise in this scenario. How do you call that on the river? I think he has a jack. Why do you think a hypothetical opponent has only the nuts when they bet the river? Realize, right? This is a stone hypothetical opponent. So why in your mind would you think the opponent only has the nuts whenever they bet the river? I mean, pot odds exist, right? Realize that pot odds exist. And in that scenario, we only need to win 25-ish, 30-ish% of the time, depending on the pot odds. I mean, let's go back and take a look at them. In this scenario on the river, we have to put in a fourth pot, right? So we have to win 25% of the time. We're going to be good here. I don't know, 30, 35, 40, 60% of the time. So this is a spot where I think we have a pretty easy call. You don't know about me, but whenever they have ace-10, or when you have ace-10, they have ace-jack or ace-king. Sometimes they beat you. Well, realize that's okay, right? Understand that variance exists, and you're going to lose sometimes. Good poker does not mean winning every hand you play. If you win every hand you play, you're a fish. Think about it, right? How do you ensure you win every hand or the vast majority of hands that you play? It's actually pretty easy. Just play aces, right? Play aces and you win almost every time. A long time ago, at small stakes, there would be a game where they played 7-card stud with no ante. And the right strategy in 7-card stud with no ante is to just play almost entirely very strong hands. That game was not fun, so it died, right? That's why we have blinds and antes and no limit hold'em. Did you also know a long time ago, there were not 2 blinds and no limit hold'em. There was 1 blind. The first super system from way back in the day, the limit hold'em game that was discussed, had 1 blind. Could you imagine how lame of a game that must have been? Thank goodness they changed it. We're playing a slightly different game now with 2 blinds and antes. It turns out lots of money in the pot induces action. If you sit there and wait for only the nuts, you are the fish at the table. And you're going to get crushed because you're going to get ran over. All right. So that's how we check raise a little bit thinner for value. Top pair, pretty good kicker, 30, 40, big blinds deep, or shallower, is usually pretty happy just to check raise and get the money in, especially if your opponents are slightly calling stationy, especially if they have wide ranges. This is a spot where we want to apply pressure with our best hands and some draws. All right. Tip number 2, be aggressive in spots where you have the nut advantage. The nut advantage is when you have more combinations of very strong hands in your range than your opponent does in their range. And when you have this advantage, you want to play your range very aggressively. And you want to put your opponent's hands that are not the nuts, which is going to be most of their range, in a very, very tough spot. And this is shown often as the pre-flop aggressor on high card boards like Ace King X, King Queen X, spots like that. And also whenever you are, let's say, the big blind, it's going to happen when the flop comes low connected cards like 7-6-4 or 7-5-5 because the initial raiser doesn't have a whole lot of 5s, whereas the pre-flop caller has a lot of 5s, right? Seems like a lot of you enjoy playing 7-card stud in the chat box. Well, have fun with that. Enjoy yourselves. A long time ago, well, I still do this every once in a while, I'll find a new game to play, and I'll play it for like 6 months in whatever spare time I have. And I'll try to get good at it because you never know when a good game is going to pop up. And a long time ago, it must have been 15 years ago, I did my best to learn how to play 7-card stud. Oh my goodness, I hated that game. I did not like 7-card stud. Ugh. If you don't like 7-card stud as well, do me a favor, click the like and subscribe button below. I'd appreciate it. And if you like 7-card stud, well, click the like button too. Okay, let's take a look at some spots where we have the range / nut advantage. Mainly nut advantage, though. Okay, here. This player raises, this player calls. We call big blind with 4-3 suited, of course. Flop comes Jack 5-3. This is a spot where no one has much of an advantage, so we're probably just going to end up checking. And check call, check fold, depending on how it goes. It's a pretty rough spot with a backdoor flush draw, backdoor straight draw. We can't really fold. Turns a 6. All right. Now, when the small blind checks, I think we probably still want to check because if we bet and get called, we're almost certainly behind. And if we are almost certainly behind when we bet and get called, it's not really a great spot. Also, if it does check down here, we actually win a decent chunk of the time. So I think checking's fine. So we check. Now, initial raiser bets 2,000, half pot, and small blind calls. Okay. So now we have the best hand almost never, once it goes back call. But we do have an open-ended straight draw, and a 3 is almost certainly good. So I think either calling is fine. Well, I think calling is fine, but I also think raising in this scenario is at least a reasonable option. You may say, why would we want to raise here? Well, if you think about it, who has more nut combinations in this scenario? Who has the 7-4s and the 4-2s? Well, we do, right? The small blind does not have the 7-4 or the 4-2. The hijack does not have the 7-4 or the 4-2, but we certainly do. Also, we definitely have all the 6-5s. We also have random Jack 6 and Jack 5. We also have 6-3, right? Now, you may say that we would always bet those on the turn, but I don't necessarily think we should always bet them on the turn. I've done a decent amount of studying with a program called Munker Solver, which is like Pio Solver, but for multi-way scenarios. And when you are out of position, multi-way, you want to be doing a lot of checking in general. And you always want to make sure your checking range is protected with some very strong hands that can put in the check raise. So this is a spot where I definitely think it is reasonable to put in the check raise with the nuts. So if we're going to put in the check raise with some nuts, we also want to check raise with some bluffs. And the best bluffs to check raise here are the hands that cannot win at the showdown, but have pretty good equity. And that's going to be hands containing a 4. So do we have a whole lot of hands containing a 4 here? I mean, we have some. I think this one's fine too. I'm on the cusp between calling and raising here. We're definitely not folding, by the way. Some people say we should fold here, but no. You don't want to fold here. If our straight draw is almost certainly good. 3 is almost certainly good. So we're getting just like really good odds to try to draw at this point. And this time we do go for the raise. If we do get jammed on by the hijack, it's certainly not a good scenario. But remember, we are announcing we have a lot of nut hands here. I see Roth's Child here says that opponents are not thinking about the nut advantage. Maybe they are, maybe they aren't. But think about it from the opponent's point of view. If you have pocket 10s and you bet this turn, you get called and then you get raised. Are you thinking, my pocket 10s are the nuts, I'm going to put my money in? Or are you thinking, oh my God, I ran into it here, I guess I got to fold? Type in the comment section what you would do. This is a spot where, in my mind, if I have pocket 10s and I bet the turn, which I think is, reasonable at least, this is a spot where you're folding. Small blind can easily have a jack. Big blind can easily have the nuts. And as long as your opponents are not super straightforward, where they always bet the nuts and always check worse hands, I think it's just an easy fold with pocket 10s. Even if you have a hand like Jack 10 and you let it go check on the flop and you value bet turn and get called and then raise, it's just a fold. It sucks, but it's a fold. Because this is a spot where big blind has a big nut advantage, right? So don't think that your opponents are just always going to play perfectly against you. A lot of people get it in their minds, oh, my opponents are just going to play perfectly against me every time. I guess I can never get out of line. It turns out that you get out of line sometimes, especially in spots where you have lots and lots of nut hands. If we do get called here, we are probably going to be jamming river, by the way, on pretty much all rivers, because if I had the straight, I would also like to jam on the river, right? So we get to have some bluffs, and I think this is a pretty reasonable spot to go for it. Let's take a look at another one. We raise it up with the 10-8 suited. Big blind calls. Ooh, I can already tell you we're tripling this one. This is a situation where I know when you raise from earlier middle position, we have all the nuts, all the sets, all the 2 pairs, all the straights. And the opponent lacks all of those, or at least most of those. They could have queen 10, sure. They could have maybe ace jack, but they 3-bet aces and kings and jacks and ace king, right? So this is a scenario where we have a gigantic nut advantage. So we're going to be triple barreling off with every hand with a gut shot that lacks showdown value, and that's essentially any 10. If you think about my range, I actually don't have a whole lot of 10s that don't have a pair to go with them. I mean, I have 10-9, 10-8 suited. Probably don't even play 10-7 suited, right? So we don't have 10-8. We don't have like 10-6. We don't have any of the total garbage. If I had jack 10, I would not triple off because we win sometimes. So this is a spot where we want to be betting frequently. And something else a lot of people don't know, or they don't play like they know, is this is a board where when you have a big range advantage and you have a big nut advantage and your opponent's range connectivity, as I call it, is very good, meaning whatever they're going to call with is pretty decent, right? Like in this scenario, if they have an ace, it's pretty good, they're not folding. If they have a king, it's pretty good, they're not folding. If they have a spade draw, it's pretty good, they're not folding. And if they have a jack, it's pretty good, they're not folding, right? So in this scenario, when you have the range advantage and the nut advantage, and your opponent's going to connect okay with the board with their entire continuing range, this is a spot where we want to be betting big, like 2/3 pot, and we're looking to use big bet sizes in general. This is going to set us up for a very, very solid triple barrel scenario with our 10s, and also we get to play bigger pots when we do have our opponent beat with our ace 10-ish type hands and better. So this is a spot where we definitely want to use a big size. You can run this through the GTO solver and confirm. And I can already tell you we're just tripling off. Want to use geometric bet sizing like we discussed earlier. When we are polarized, we want to be betting roughly the same proportion on the turn and the river. Here we go for 60% pot turn bet. Here we're on the river. I think we could probably go a little bit bigger on the turn to go a little bit smaller on the river, but this is fine and good. And a lot of people look at this and say, well, aren't they going to call you with any ace? They may. They may call us with any ace. But what about all the kings and the jacks and the spade draws, right? We get all of that stuff to fold out by the river. Also, we don't care if they call us with the ace because I already told you my range to triple off here in this scenario is something like ace 10 and better for value. So if they want to call down with the ace 3 and we're sitting here with ace 10 or better, we're just printing money with all of our value hands in this spot. So I definitely like this play. If you are not tripling it off here, you're making a big mistake, and you're essentially never bluffing. If you never bluff, what's that allow your opponent to do? Well, it just allows them to fold a ton. And that lets them play perfectly, very easily. Whenever the right strategy is both obvious and easy, that's not going to work out too well for you in general. Our 50% pot bet size is obsolete. You're going to find that for the most part, this is not always true, it depends on your stack depth, but in general, you want to be using a bet size that accomplishes what you want to accomplish. And quite often, if we are trying to get all the money in by the river, we're going to need to use a bet size that lets us put in roughly the same amount on the turn and the river. You don't necessarily want to use very different bet sizes. Sometimes there are times for this. I mean, I'm not going to say always. But there are some times where you want to, most of the time you're going to find you want to use roughly the same bet on the turn and the river. Why? That's what the solver does. I'm sure there's some GTO math principle behind it. I am not a mathematician. I'm just a poker player. And I know how to look at a chart. When you run the numbers in any GTO program, it tells you to use roughly the sizing with your polarized range. So that's what we do. Believe it or not, I trust math. This time the opponent folds. We win the pot. Sometimes they call here, though. If they call here and they show up with king, queen for a hero call, you can't get sad and annoyed and think, oh man, I should never bluff. They always call me. Don't think that. Don't be a baby. We're not babies here. I'm sure there are other YouTube channels and Twitch channels for babies. We're not babies. We're adults. Sometimes our bluffs are going to get called, and that is okay. Because it's fine. We know our range is well protected. I already told you all the good hands we're betting. I'm not going to go through it again. And when they call the king, queen, they lose to every single value bet. And that is fantastic. All right. A lot of you want to go on about various bet sizes. Check out the tournament masterclass at pokercoaching.com. I go through all sorts of scenarios, and you're going to find that typically with your best hands, you want to figure out how to get it in by the river in a reasonable manner. With your marginal made hands, sometimes that changes. As stacks get shallower or deeper, the size, the proportion of the pot of the big bet typically gets bigger when the pot is, well, when your stack to pot ratio is deeper. And as your stack to pot ratio is shallower, you typically bet using a smaller big bet size to the point that the big bet may be half pot or something like that. Whereas when you're deeper stacked, the big bet may be 150% pot on the turn. All right. Next, we want to play tightly against strong ranges. So this is sort of the opposite of whenever we have the range advantage and the nut advantage, we want to be betting very aggressively. When we do not have those things, we want to be playing very cautiously. And what a lot of people do is they make the mistake of just marginally calling down with marginal made hands because they think that's what they're supposed to do. It's like, oh, it's a bluff catcher. What can I do? You have to realize when you're up against a very tight range and you're out of position, you got to be folding a ton. Like a lot. This is even more true in multi-way pots. So let's take a look at a scenario. Under the gun opens. This should be a strong range, of course. Small blind calls. This should also be a reasonably strong range. Mostly big cards, suited connector, etc. We call, of course. We get this flop. Pretty good hand. But we face a 3/4 pot bet, which should already be kind of polarizing. Now you may say, my opponents just bet 3/4 pot every time. They don't know what they're doing. Okay, account for it, right? But this is usually going to be a pretty strong range because this player is betting into 2 opponents. And the small blind's range actually connects really, really well with this board. They're going to have Jack 10 in their range. They're also going to have lots of Ace Jack, King Jack, Queen Jack, Jack 9 suited, Jack 8 suited, right? They have a lot of 10s. They have a lot of straight draws. They have pocket 5s, maybe even pocket Jacks and 10s if they don't 3-bet it. So they have a lot of good hands. And of course, I can have something too in the big blind. So now it goes 3,000 and call. What do we do with the Jack 9 here? Type in the comment section what you would do with the Jack 9 in this scenario. This is a spot where I think if we face a small bet, we can't really fold. But against a big bet and a call, I think this is actually a very, very easy fold. As Chip Avalanche says, be bold and fold. I think that's the play. I think folding is the play. Think about our options here. If we call, what are good turns for me? I mean, a 9's not good because we could easily be against Jack 10 already, or pocket 10s, or King Queen, right? If a Jack comes, yeah, Jack's probably good, but that's 2 outs. Every other card's bad. Literally every turn card's bad besides a Jack. And if we face additional aggression on any turn, we're not happy about it. If we turn to spade, I mean, yeah, it's fine, but it's not great. This is just a spot where you got to fold. It sucks, but what are you going to do? Some people are saying raise. The problem with raising is that every hand that is better than yours calls you and beats you. And under the gun's range in this scenario to bet big on the flop should be a whole lot of hands like King Jack and better, Ace Jack and better, right? So, I mean, King Jack or better and Ace Jack and better are, well, we're in terrible shape against those. And then the bluffs for under the gun should be King Queen and Queen 9 suited, which have loads of equity too. And we block Queen 9 suited, so it's more likely to be King Queen or a value hand. So how does Jack 9 do against King Queen or a value hand? Turns out it does pretty poorly, right? This is just a fold. Like I said, against a small bet, this is a spot where we have a pretty easy call, I think. But against a big bet, it cuts off our pot odds. Small blind. Don't forget the small blind. They have all sorts of good hands too. So this is a spot where I think we have a pretty easy fold. Grimley says they could have ace, king, or ace, queen. They could. They shouldn't bet the flop with ace, king, or ace, queen all that often. Why, you may ask? Well, because small blind is going to nail this board. When small blind nails this board, you don't want to bet ace, king, and ace, queen, because if you get check raised, you have to fold. And that's terrible. So this is a spot where under the gun should not be betting every time. I want to make it really clear. Under the gun should not be betting every time in the spot. Why should they not bet every time, even though they have jacks and 10s in their range? Because small blind connects so well with this board if small blind's anywhere near decent, right? So, and they have to worry about the big blind randomly having a good hand. So this is a spot where under the gun must have a good hand to bet. When I say a good hand, they must have a strong range. They must have a polarized range to bet. Opponent's bet size indicates a polarized range. So they should have a polarized range. Their bet size indicates a polarized range. So this player is strong. Small blind is sticking around against a strong polarized range. And their pre-flop calling range must be strong, because that typically small blind calling range is pretty solid. If you're unsure about pre-flop strategies, make sure you check out pokercoaching.com in the tools section. We have GTO pre-flop charts. You can go through and take a look at what small blind should be calling with. It's quite a strong range. So we have a strong range under the gun, strong range in small blind. How does Jack 9, top pair, basically no kicker? How does top pair, no kicker do against 2 strong ranges? Fold. Take your cards, deposit them right into the muck pile, okay? Get rid of them ASAP. Good fold. I like folds. Well, I hate folding actually, but sometimes you just gotta fold. So, those are 3 post-flop tips to crush the small stakes games. Hope you enjoyed this. If you liked this, do me a favor, click the like and subscribe button below. Number 1, check raise thinner for value. Number 2, be aggressive in spots where you have the nut advantage. And number 3, play tightly against strong ranges. Having a Valentine's Day sale right now because love is in the air. Oh my gosh. Is Valentine's Day coming up? I have not bought my wife or kids anything. They'll be all right. After we're done discussing the Valentine's Day sale, I'll answer some of your questions. So make sure you stick around, type your questions in the question box, and I will answer some of those. We're having a Valentine's Day sale. You all know that I have a training site, pokercoaching.com. Well, I do. We have loads and loads and loads of courses available for you. We're not a site that has one 6-hour course like a lot of the other training sites out there. We have tons of content on whatever you want to be studying. We have courses on that are completely dedicated to beating loose live cash games. This one right here. We also have crushing tough cash games where I go through and discuss how to beat the difficult games, right? We also go through hands at 1-2 live no limit for long periods of time. These are all 6 or 8 hour long courses going through very specific topics to ensure you have no questions about these specific topics. Also, we have my cash game masterclass for all the cash game players here. This is a 29-part course where I teach you everything you need to crush the cash games. And it's all on sale right now. Also, if you're a Poker Coaching Premium member, you actually get access to this. Just included in the membership. All of these are included in the membership. We have tournament courses as well. Oh, all of these are included in Poker Coaching Premium too. Do we just include everything in Poker Coaching Premium? That seems like a heck of a value. Well, it's Valentine's Day. Might as well give some good value. We discuss all sorts of things pertaining to tournaments. We discuss some of my very deep runs. We discuss preparing students for $1 million buy-in tournaments. We go through World Series of Poker final tables, showing off great play and not so great play. All sorts of that. All sorts of things like that. I also just released my tournament masterclass. This is over 30 hours long, not including any of the live play / hand history reviews where I go through all of my deep runs recently, which is another 15 or 20 hours worth of content. And in this masterclass, I teach you everything you need to know to play every stage of the tournament optimally and how to maximize your equity. This is actually not for sale. You cannot buy it, but it's included in Poker Coaching Premium. Everything's included. Here is the table of contents for the tournament course. As you see, each of these is a video or more. Lots and lots and lots and lots of content here discussing everything you need to know to beat poker tournaments. This took me forever to make, like a year. Nothing's ever taken me a year to make, but I'm glad that it is done. You have ICM here. A few people asked about ICM earlier. ICM. It's 3 letters, but it's actually a pretty long section of the course. Also, someone asked about PKO tournaments. We discussed those in the tournament format adjustments. And here are all the hand history reviews. These are all deep runs I've made since COVID happened. So, loads of stuff here. We also have a few satellite wins. I know some of you said that you wanted satellite content. We have a Sunday online session where I ended up making a pretty deep run. So that's good. This is just like a live stream where I just sit down and play the whole thing. So there you go. How do you know when to fold Pocket Kings preflop? You probably shouldn't be trying to fold the Pocket Kings preflop. Our members at Poker Coaching are crushing it. Here we see Irish Soccer Poker. Take a look at the graph. Talks about how he's, dirtling along until got a hold of Poker Coaching. Then he started winning. Go figure. We also have Blaz Zerjal, probably our student with the best results, unless someone's out there lurking and not telling me. Blaz has cashed for $2.4 million over the last year or two. So huge congrats to him. Good job, good work. And we have 2 options for the Poker Coaching membership. We have the Poker Coaching Standard membership. You can get a 3-year membership for effectively $17 a month. Hate to break it to you, but if you want to succeed at poker, you need to make sure you are studying and improving your skills. If you are not studying at least a little bit, you are going to get left behind and your opponents are going to demolish you. In Poker Coaching, we have loads of quizzes. As you see, we're up to number 1,027 or something like that, where me or the other coaches go through hands that we played. And we make sure that you know how to play every single betting round, where you actually have to commit to what you would do. Remember how earlier in the presentation, I asked you all to pause and type in the comment section what you would do. You kind of have to do that at pokercoaching.com, except for every single street. I know it sounds difficult. It sounds a little bit strenuous and tedious and a little bit like work. But it turns out, if you want to get good at anything, you can't just sit back and have a beer and pass out on the couch. You have to get in there and you have to study. I'm trying to teach you all to be good poker players, not marginal poker players. This is not a training site where you just put on a video and then fall asleep in the corner, okay? So here's examples of some of the quizzes. We put you in a scenario like this. There is audio announcing, what happened. So here it is. The flop comes, the opponent checks. What should we do in this scenario? Check, bet 60K, bet 140K, or bet 240K, right? We want to make sure that you know what to do in these scenarios. You click your answer, and then you get a score. This player got a 10 on the flop, which is a good score. And we do this for flop, turn, river, etc. All right, also in Poker Coaching Premium, the upgraded membership, we have over 300 classes and webinars. Kind of like the first 30 minutes of this show today, except for way more advanced, way more in-depth. And they're usually longer, an hour or an hour and a half long, featuring many of the best poker players and coaches in the world. I'll just go through a few of them very briefly. We have Faraz Jaka. He is the WPT Player of the Year. Like me, see that giant trophy back there? That's the World Poker Tour Player of the Year trophy. Faraz Jaka, also WPT Player of the Year. He's absolutely crushes it. We have James Romero. He was one of the top 10 live poker players before COVID happened. Now he's just winning all the money online. We have Bert Stevens, #1 online player in tournaments in the world a year or two ago. Got rich, took some time off. Fell down the rankings a little bit, but now he is back grinding hard. He won 2 EPTs recently. Also, final table, the $10,000 tournament on GG a few times. He is absolutely demolishing it. And he's streaming today for the Poker Coaching Premium members. You know how whenever the best players in the world stream on Twitch, they get a lot of viewers, right? And it's kind of hard to talk to them because they're streaming and there's a million people going off in the chat. Well, at Poker Coaching Premium, we do private streams for the Poker Coaching Premium students only. And that usually ends up being 50 to 100 people in the stream, live, watching Bert Stevens, the absolute sicko crusher, just playing his normal Thursday grind. I don't know what that's going to end up being, but usually he's playing all the high-stakes games, $2,000 tournaments, $5,000 tournaments, all the big games, and talking through all of his decisions. You can ask him questions in real time, and he answers everything. Also, Matt Affleck does this. Faraz Jaka does this. The coaches are in there grinding it out for you. We have lots of other coaches. We just added Tommy Angelo. He is the mindset expert. I have learned a ton from him throughout my career. And many, many more world-class coaches. You can read more about them at pokercoaching.com. So far, I've spent over $250,000, $250,000, to hire these coaches so that you don't have to. And you got to realize, I'm not out here paying tiny amounts of money to marginal coaches to make content. I don't really actually care about making content, even though I have a lot of content. I care about making high quality, actionable material that is going to help you succeed at poker. I'm not trying to waste your time, have you watch something that does not matter. I am trying to help you improve your skills so that you can win more money and at the end of the day, improve your life. And I'm going to continue paying the coaches mid-5 figures every single month to host live webinars, make quizzes, host live streams, and it's worth it to me. So let me ask you a question. Obviously, I'm not going to charge you the $10,000 a month I'm paying out or more to the coaches, and I'm not even going to charge you $500 per month for poker coaching like some other training sites out there try to charge you. But if I did charge you $500 per month, let's just pretend like I was one of the other training sites that charges $500 a month out there, and all I did was help you win one additional pot each session that you would not have otherwise won. Imagine every day you go to play, you win one additional pot. What is one additional pot worth? Well, if you're playing even, 1-2 no limit, if you win an additional $30, $40, $50 every day, what's $30 times 30? 30 times 30 is $900 per month you win. It's probably worth it, right? If you're playing $100 buy-in tournaments, you don't get stacked once every tournament or once every day even, right? An extra stack is worth $100 a day. It's $3,000 per month. It's pretty easy value, right? What if all I did was let you attend the live weekly coaching webinars? We have multiple of them every week with our coaches who have combined earnings of over $50 million, and let you ask them your biggest poker questions. You have to remember, a lot of this content we make, it is not pre-recorded like a lot of the other sites out there. A lot of the content we make is recorded live so that you, the members, can get in there and ask the questions in real time so that you get your questions answered. I mean, this is like private coaching at basically a very, very minimal cost. What if all I did was let you put yourself in thousands of poker situations and get immediate feedback from our quizzes so that you have a way of practicing daily, even if you do live in a place where online poker is not legal and you're waiting to get back to the live poker tables because of COVID? What is it worth to continue to get in feedback, continue improving your skills, and continue learning? I mean, think about what that is worth, to be able to continue honing your skills even in this trying time that the world is in. Well, if you think that is worth $500 per month, then you definitely need to take advantage of the Valentine's Day sale and join Poker Coaching Premium, because you can get Poker Coaching Premium for as little as $56 per month if you get the 3-year plan. We have a lot of payment options available for you. You can get a 1-month membership for $100, or if you sign up for longer periods of time, you get a solid discount. You sign up for a 3-year membership, you get it at roughly half off. Now look, I realize that $56 per month on average may sound expensive. It's cheaper than almost every other training site out there, but I realize that may sound expensive. And I understand. I started with $50 a long time ago, and I was spending like literally everything I won playing poker and all the money I made for my job learning poker, because I realized this is an investment. This is going to help you improve your skills, which will let you win more money and improve your life, right? That's what we're going for here. And compared to going to college, imagine you wanted to go to college for 4 years. Could you go to college for 4 years for, let's call it $2,400, $600 per year? Well, obviously not. Most colleges are charging you many, many, many thousands of dollars per year. They're providing you with, 4 hours of content per day, which, we have way more than that available at Poker Coaching. And, they're teaching you a skill. They're giving you a degree. I get it. I'm not going to discuss the merits of college. But this is kind of like poker college, except for it costs almost nothing if you think about how much it costs per day. $56 per month is $2 per day. Can you spare $2 per day to improve your poker skills? Maybe you can, maybe you can't. I get it. If you can't, that is fine. You have the free membership at Poker Coaching. You can go there and get plenty of content. Also, you can get the standard membership. That's also a little bit cheaper. But to make it even more obvious that you should be signing up for Poker Coaching Premium, understand that I made this site to give you all the tools and all the training you could ever need to achieve your full poker potential. And if I fail to deliver on that promise, I do not want or deserve your money. Lots of training sites out there, they want to charge you a ton of money up front for 6 hours of content. And then, if you don't like it, they don't reply to your email. They're not going to give you a refund. They're not going to do anything like that because they gotcha. I'm not trying to get you here. If you do not like poker coaching for whatever reason, I give a 30-day money-back guarantee. Get in there, try the site, study from the site. If you don't like it, tell me you don't like it, send me an email, and I'll give you a completely, 100% refund. Doesn't happen all that often where people ask for refunds, but sometimes they do, and I get it, right? Sometimes people say, it's too high level. If that's the case, I will recommend you check out my free fundamentals course at pokercoaching.com/fundamentals. And, we give you a refund, right? I'm not trying to charge money to people who are not adequately skilled to use the site. If you don't like the site, right? I don't deserve your money. And I'm cool with that. I'm not out here trying to make the most money possible. I'm out here trying to help all of you improve your skills so that you can make the most of your opportunities. So anyway, check it out, pokercoaching.com/Valentines to get a solid discount. Can you upgrade from standard? Yes. So if you have any questions about billing, send us an email at support@pokercoaching.com. What if you took a horrible player and made him into a winning player? Yeah, that's essentially what we did. I have a cash game masterclass, as you see it right here. And when that first came out, this was like one of the first really, really big courses that I spent a lot of time making that was meant to be like all-inclusive, everything you need to know to beat the cash games. And we put it out to some students, and 3 different people told me within a month they went from breaking even at cash games to winning 10 big blinds per hour playing cash games. I'm talking like 2-5 no limit, 5-10 no limit. So they're making $100 an hour, $50 an hour. And can you imagine the value that you give someone whenever you give them a skill that lets them win $50 or $100 per hour indefinitely? I mean, that's ridiculous life-changing money. And all it takes is studying for a month. I mean, it's is kind of a no-brainer if you think about it. All right, let's see. Do we have content on single table tournament sit and goes? We have a little bit of sit and go content, not a ton. I generally recommend people not actually spend a lot of time playing the sit and goes because they're not all that popular anymore. People always ask me, do you have content on insert various games? Do you have 7-card stud content? And the answer is no, because people don't really play 7-card stud all that often. That said, we do have a spin and go course coming out in March, featuring one of the biggest winners in spin and go, so I'm excited about that. That is a game that's played pretty frequently. It's one of the more popular games on all of the major sites. So we're making content on it, right? Like if the game is played a lot, and I think that you can make substantial money from it, then I'm all for making content to teach the people who want to play that. But as a poker educator, I do not want to teach you and lead you down the path of spending a lot of time studying a game that does not actually result in you having a big payoff down the road, right? So be aware of that. Also, I may not be adequately skilled to make the content. And, I had to go out and hire a spin and go coach, for example, because I'm not good at spin and goes. Almost never played spin and goes. So I go out and hire one of the best players in the world for that. And that's coming in March. That'll just be included in Poker Coaching Premium, by the way. There are no upsells or anything like that. You sign up to Poker Coaching Premium, you have access to everything. That's how I want it to be. And trying to give a value, right? Is the online material different from your books? Well, books are written content, right? These are all videos or interactive quizzes and whatnot. So definitely a different format. What's my opinion on 180 person sit and goes? These are tournaments. 180 person sit and goes are tournaments. Any tips on playing Blitz? Is Blitz just like the fast forward games? Fast forward, speed games, whatever you want to call them. These are basically the same thing as cash games, but they're way more difficult. Do you have an FAQ on the GTO app? Send us an email, support@pokercoaching.com. We have an app, by the way. All the stuff's available on your iTunes or Android app. We have GTO charts. Do you all know we have GTO charts? Basically, any scenario you want to know, you can look it up. And it'll tell you what to do from a GTO point of view. And then you can adjust according to whatever your opponents do incorrectly. Do we accept altcoins? Yeah, you can pay me with alternative coins. You can pay me with gold, silver, Beanie Babies, Pogs, Bitcoin, Skrill, whatever you want. I'll take it. When are the 30-day blind charts coming? Soon. We have them in hand. There's a problem with the data. Every time I get them, there's a problem with the data. It's so tilting. Coming very, very soon, though. If you were... Wait. Is it too slow to start as a beginner with the books and the free content? No. I mean, look, if you don't know what you're doing in poker, if you're a beginning poker player, I would definitely recommend you go to my fundamentals course and go through it. It's completely free. It's going to get you up to speed quickly. Go to pokercoaching.com/fundamentals and then get my book over here, Mastering Small Stakes No Limit Hold'em. Looks like me. It's a big book, 500 something pages. This is essentially the fundamentals fully explained so that you know how to play all of the common scenarios. Again, it's a bit of a big book. I understand. You may not think, oh my God, I'm a beginner. I need to go through this, but I hate to break it to you. Yeah, you do. You got to realize whenever you're getting into poker today, you are getting into a game that many people have been playing for a very, very long period of time. And these people who've been playing for a very, very long period of time have studied a lot and they're already pretty good. So you are essentially getting into a game where you have no skills and everybody else has pretty high skills. This is actually one of the things that may hurt poker a lot long term, is that players are so incentivized to get very good at the game that the people who survive in the game for any amount of time inevitably become very good at the game. And if new people come into the game and they're not very good at the game, they're going to get crushed. And if the people who come into the game have a bad experience the first few times they play because they're nowhere near as good as the other players, that's not going to work out. So before you start playing, you definitely want to make sure you are studying a decent amount. Before I ever put $50 online a long time ago, I read like 6 or 8 poker books. Back then they didn't have training sites or anything, so I studied all the content available. If they were training sites, I definitely would have signed up to them. I mean, even today, I still sign up to all the training sites because I'm doing my best to continue to improve my skills, and I consolidate all the information I learn and I give it to you. So anyway, definitely study before you play. That is mandatory. Go through the fundamentals course. You can get this book, by the way, at jlpoker.com/mastering. That should work. Should you play free online games? Probably not. You should probably not play free money games. I would definitely recommend playing for at least tiny bits of real money. All right, what's the most efficient way to study using various programs? I'd probably just recommend looking the programs up on YouTube or consulting the support of whatever program you're talking about. It's rough being poor. Well, I know. I could tell you about it. Whenever I first started playing, I had no money, right? I had to work a minimum wage job to get together $50 to buy into an online poker site, right? And I get it. I get it. That's why a lot of my content is free. Have you seen my YouTube channel? Presumably you have. You're probably there, or you're on Twitch. Go to youtube.com/pokercoaching. We have tons of content there, completely for free, right? I'm doing my best to help all of the people who are trying to improve their skills. And I realize that if you have no money, you have no money to spend on anything. You're trying to just survive, right? I get it. I mean, that's where I used to be because I had a minimum wage job, right? And what I did whenever I was there is I made a point to spend all of my free time trying to learn a skill that I thought would be valuable long-term, which was playing poker. And that resulted in me studying poker 4, 5, 6 hours a day, every single day, because I did not like working my minimum wage job. I wanted to have money. And that resulted in me being, I went all in on poker is what it amounts to. And I worked hard, I grinded hard, and here we are today. What do I think of the 50-50 format at one-table tournaments? These are games where half the people get paid and the other half don't. I think that is a terrible format. They're basically dead. I would not recommend you spend your time on that. Let's see. Modern Lurker says, you love the free content, you're not even a poker coaching member, and you've made huge strides in your game. You turned 100 into 2,900. That's the goal, right? So look, you do not have to pay me money to get good at poker. Like I said, we have lots of stuff available completely for free. You can get a free trial membership at pokercoaching.com/free, right? And in the ideal world, let's say you do have no money like I used to have no money. You take your 50 or $100 and you turn it into 2,900, and you think, oh my God, this could be a thing, right? Maybe we're actually going to be good at poker. We're going to be able to succeed at this. Maybe you decide, maybe I should sign up to a training site and start spending more time improving my skills. Maybe I should get in these live webinars with the best players in the world and ask them my questions and have them answer me every single time, right? Maybe that's what we need to do. And hopefully, if I helped you turn your 100 into 2,900, you'll think of me again to help you turn your 2,900 into 100K, right? And that is what we are going for. All right, I have to go. Have a great day. Enjoy yourselves. Make the most of it. I appreciate all of you being here. Again, click the like and subscribe buttons below and the notification bell. I know that almost none of you click that notification bell. The YouTube robot told me. So look, can you please feed the YouTube robot and click the notification bell below? I would appreciate it. Hope you all have a great, great day. Hope you enjoy yourselves. Make the most of your time. I know some people don't enjoy their experience, but look, you only have one life to live, at least as far as my small brain here knows. If you only have one life to live, you need to make the most of it. Don't settle. Make the most of your experience because you only have one, okay? I love all of you. I appreciate all of you. Good luck in your games. Have fun. I will see you, if you're a Poker Coaching Premium member, later today in the live webinar with DraftGanger. That's going to be a lot of fun. I love watching his streams. Seems like every time he streams, he wins a tournament, and I love watching people who I know win all the money. So I'll see you there later today. Good luck. Have fun. Thanks again.